It started because I can always, just in case, because come on now. And for anybody who is coming in, like I had the opportunity to do lives with these amazing ladies this last week. And I appreciate you guys so much for doing my last minute, like, hey guys, do we want to go live? Right. And they were like, yeah, sure. Okay, no problem. And I just thought that was such an extra juicy bonus because I get to speak to you individually. Some of you, some I haven't spoken to in a really long time, but it just like for me, it just like grounded me back in your juice, right? I was like, oh yeah, that piece. So I'm going to be really excited to share clips from the live for the peeps over on social. So you'll be tagged to that. You'll see that. And then this recording here is going to be available for 7 days for everybody who signs up. And then we will, if you guys want to reach out to any of the speakers, you have that opportunity. And if any of the speakers have any like free tools that you'd love to offer today to any of the people, you are more than welcome to drop it in the chat. And Diana's my assistant's in the chat operating as me, and she will make sure that it gets out to everybody. Okay, guys. I will say that we will probably, if we see your note taker in the chat, we will probably kick it out. No offense, but that's the only way you want to keep it juicy. So Diana, you'll have to kick out the note takers. But I also know they automatically join Zoom calls, so I'm not accusing
Yeah, they
you of
do.
anything.
Yeah, I think I see mine in there, and that's like an automatic thing.
Yes, I mean, that's different. You're here. But I'm talking about like in general, we don't want anyone taking, listen, in the age of AI, you could take this whole recording and make an amazing article about vulnerability. And I mean, we could co-create that. So anyway, if anybody's into that, let me know, because content is content, and I will take it. Okay, guys, I am not going to do a bunch of huge introductions because you're here. Obviously, one of them invited you, or hopefully you looked them up, and you will get to know them as we go through this conversation. And I am always going to be sharing and highlighting them in any of the follow-ups and the stuff that's already gone out. So let's not spend the time doing all of that. I'd rather jump into the juicy bits. And for the ladies who are here, I just want you to know, and anyone who's going to be watching to know, like, this is a open conversation. So that means if you disagree, feel free to disagree. If you want to interrupt, feel free to interrupt. This is not a like presentation, right? And this is not me having to be like, I will ask you guys individually certain things, I'm sure, but I just want it to be a free and open space for us to like really be like those girlfriends. We're sitting down at lunch and we're talking about this conversation. I mean, I just so happen to be facilitating it. That's just how it happens. Okay, good. So my first question to you ladies is around vulnerability. How much vulnerability is too much out here online? Anyone have anything to say about that? And is there such a thing? Is there such a thing? Kayna, yes, kick us off.
Yes. So I think you and I, Monique, have actually talked about this before, but I think that for me, the line is when I'm still in the challenge, or I'm still deeply in the emotional place of processing what I'm going through. I will not share from there. I think that we've all heard that saying, like, you share from the scar, not from the wound, right? Like from the open wound, you share when you've healed, or at least it's past and you are at a place where you're ready to share the lesson versus just pouring it all out there. That's not just to turn away any potential clients or anything like that. It's also to protect you, because you are in that space of processing, and I think you want to keep that safe space until you're ready to share.
Yeah, I know some of you guys may have, I mean, if anyone has an opposing opinion, definitely share it. I do feel that there are some times where people will share from a place that they're not healed from, and from that safety perspective or protecting yourself, you'll have people who will have something to say about it. I just have it like, don't put anything on social that you wouldn't put on a billboard. Like if you don't want it on a billboard, someone driving down the highway seeing it and you got a problem with it, or you're going to be triggered by someone reacting to it, then you probably don't want to put it up there. If you're good to go to battle online with them, or it doesn't impact you in a way, then say whatever it is that you want. But you have to just be okay once you, if you're coming from that place. That's my opinion. You guys can chime in
Yeah.
on any of that.
I come in from a different perspective, I think. Like
Mm.
I used to be that way. Just from I think being wanting to feel totally comfortable about talking about everything. I wanted to make sure that I had worked through everything before, and I started to shift and share things that just really felt alive. There's something about like how content performs when it's connected to what's feeling really alive with us right now, like energetically. And I've seen so many just like peers, right? Like other women in the industry who have shared things while they're still going through it. And I think the biggest thing is not making that claim of right of like, oh, I have it all figured out. I think that's really key and that's really important. Instead, coming from a place of like, this is what's happening. And I think for me, because I share a lot of vulnerability on my page, and it's always less about the details of what actually happened, and I focus a lot on the woman I'm becoming, right? Like who am I becoming through this? And I think by focusing on that, right, like the transformation that I'm experiencing, and knowing too, I think what you can keep sacred, right? What we want to keep sacred and want to keep to ourselves versus what we want to share. I think having that really, really clear to you, to me, is the most important thing, you know?
Mhm. I love that. And how do you determine like what you keep sacred versus what you don't? Because I have it that, I mean, I guess I don't know if it's just like in terms of like your values where you're like, I'm trying to get my notes out because you guys are gonna be dropping all these gems. I'm like, Monique, you don't have your pen ready. And I'm like, sacred. I'm like this. Okay. Right? But it's like, how do you know what you keep sacred? Or do you know that in advance?
Oh, yeah, I always figure it out before,
Yeah.
100%,
Mm.
and I think it's just about really knowing yourself,
Mhm.
right, and checking in with yourself. There's so like, because I show up and I share so many, hard moments, right, I mean, major dips I've shared about when, I worked myself to death and literally almost, like, worked myself into a miscarriage with my daughter. Like, I've shared about, I mean, really just about everything I've gone through, and it's because I feel so passionate about, if this can change one woman's life, if one woman can see this story and relate to it and know that there are options and choices beyond what she currently sees. Because when we're going through something hard, right, it feels like that. It feels like we don't have any options. And it's so hard to see if you don't have people directly in your life who are expanding you, intentionally. And I think coming from that place, I feel this almost like I don't even know how to describe it besides
It
like
sounds
this
very
almost
much
like
like a
sense of
call, like
duty.
a call. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
like and
how I took that,
purpose.
what you said.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I want to like just chime in, Christina. I totally agree with what you're saying. And I feel like for me, like I just, as we're talking, I'm thinking about specific things that I've been very open to share, like going through perimenopause. Like I've been talking about that a
Yes.
lot lately. Like I can't freaking sleep. I feel like hell. Like, I'll talk about that because I know that there's so many women who are going to be like, oh my God, seriously, like, thank you for saying this.
Yes.
Versus like when I was going through a separation, that
Mhm.
wasn't something that I was ready to share until I was ready to share it. And I
Mhm.
inherently could feel, okay, I'm ready to start sharing about my journey and what this was. But there were many moments where I was like, no, it doesn't feel safe for me in my body to like put this
Mm.
out there. So I love
Mhm.
that. I love how, like, yes, we can be in the middle of something. It doesn't have to be all wrapped up, but we do feel this sort of call. Like, I need to say this out loud. Like, I need, I need you
Yeah.
to hold this in.
Yeah.
Can
Oh,
I
I
chime in? I think there's two
yeah.
ways to look at this because I think every woman goes through kind of an evolution of who you are and how much you can stand in your vulnerability. So I have a friend who actually runs one of the largest Facebook groups, like Facebook consults with her. And Monique, that story I sent you that I shared when I was like literally crying on whatever I recorded, she
Mhm.
was one of the people I called. I was like, okay, I want to share this. She's very much of the share it as it's happening. Like that's she's like, yes, and I need you to share more as it's happening. That's vulnerability. I'm like, my brain does not process that way. Like for me, I need to experience, I'm like, I need to experience it. And in that process of experiencing it, I get the lesson and I share, but I can still connect to the emotion. So I'm vulnerable in the sharing, but I have a solution. I can take the audience out of the pain into where I am now. However, there's people who they can share in the vulnerable moment. The challenge is they get re-triggered. So they share in the moment, they're like, they don't mind, putting it out there. But, and 6 months later, the challenge is the people that are not with you every day, they don't know that you've gone past that. So they're still stuck on that. And then you come back to it and then you're re-triggered because you're still in your healing process. So I honestly think based on whatever it is that you're sharing, based on your emotional intelligence and your emotional capacity at the time, you get to decide, okay, am I strong enough to share in the story as which means I won't care if 6 months later somebody brings this topic up, I'm still fine. Or if you feel like you're going to be re-triggered because you're going to know, then just pause and go through the experience, get the lesson, but be able to tap back into the emotion when you're telling the story. So when you come back, like Kenya said, when you come back and you tell the story, you can still, like, I can feel you because you can still tap into that emotion, but you can bring me out of that pain into where you are now, as opposed to leaving your customer and your audience in the pain, which is not fair. So I think you get to decide based on where you are, which are you going to share after or during, but you got to have the capacity for whichever one you decide.
I also hear in that like a responsibility.
Right.
I'm any of you guys, a lot of you guys who are in the chat know me already in terms of like, I say like social media is a great place to share your life. But if you are in business, if you are a small business owner, it is a business tool, right? And if you are using it to bring in business, then you've attracted people through, something you offer, something you're teaching, or something you're delivering, or some type of service. You've essentially made a promise to that person once they've shown up over there on what there is to expect, right? So not to say you can't, be bawling your eyes out, you can't bring humanity to it, you can't share with what you're going through, but I always put like what is it I'm actually using this platform for at the forefront of everything that I'm doing. And that may be strategy, that may be too strategic for some people. There's a lot of vulnerability that I share, but I'm definitely like always thinking like, well, what is in like the lesson you guys were talking about, right? Like what's in it for them? Where is the hopeful moment? That not leaving them in pain is a big one. I think that's a really huge message. And there will be people who will do that. And that's maybe their brand. That's that's why people go over there, right? But I'm very clear who I am as a brand and what my platform is used for. So just for anybody listening, and when we're talking about like, how do you know what to share? How do you know how much vulnerability, and how do you balance like professionalism and vulnerability and things like that? Because I know people are really worried about, well, if I share too much, are people going to think I'm unprofessional? If I share too little, am I a robot? Am I cold? Right? I do truly think it comes back to that self-awareness piece, that knowing who is in your audience, why you're here, what is it you're out here to deliver. Samara, did you want to chime in on any of that?
This is so, juicy, to use your word. Yeah, I'm just processing over here. It feels like, it feels like we should define vulnerable.
Let's do it.
Like, not that there's a single definition, but like maybe we should just like pull the cauldron out and be like, what are things that we consider vulnerability?
Pull the cauldron
because,
out,
like,
please? I love that.
Witchy vibes. Witchy vibes.
This is we're a coven, no?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But like, listen, Kenna, am I pronouncing it right?
Kena, yes.
Kena, your first opening salvo, right? Which is conventional wisdom, but it's like wisdom, right? Like we all know this thing about scars versus wounds, and we know how it feels if we're just like wounded, if we're bleeding all over people.
Yes.
And that is also, I think, seriously, a groupthink here. I think about storytelling. Right? Where what you're talking about there is the kind of vulnerability where we share a hard thing that we went through. But that there are like, okay, so what's some other versions of vulnerability? I think one of them is what I experience a lot online, which is literally just talking about big ideas and noticing that I'm getting an emotional hit and not resisting it. So now So look, my background, I have this book called Permission to Speak. My background is as a public speaking coach, and I'm huge on like really, really breaking the rules on what we thought public speaking was about and who, for whom. So I'm always like with my mischievous hat on being like, okay, but who's this really serving? So one of my questions then around vulnerability is like, if we're considering anything that makes us emotional in public, a ding against professionalism. Whose story is that? And if we're redefining professionalism to include us showing up the way we want to show up like a whole ass human, then where do our emotions fit in there? And if I get emotional talking about a big idea that has nothing to do with a story that happened in my life, that feels vulnerable. Like,
Yeah,
vulnerable.
absolutely.
And the stakes are pretty low actually, but in a way they're I don't know, they're in flux for all of us because we're trying to read a room and be like, you know, and especially for women, it's like, oh God, she cried, now she's out of control. But like, are those stories in our head, or are they in the audience? Like, this is the juicy stuff that I feel like I'm living in every day for my clients and for me.
Yeah.
Mara, I must be in tune with you energetically, because I'm like trying not to freak out. Because before you said that, the little note I wrote down that I was gonna ask Monique, like, is vulnerability showing emotion, or is it sharing emotion that makes you feel open to hurt or healing? And so for some people, they're easily emotional. So for them, it's a default of like, for them, that's them being them. It's not necessarily vulnerable, but if it's sharing something that makes you feel like, oh my God, if I share this thing, it could hurt me or heal me or heal somebody else.
That's right.
So I love that you said, you know, that emotional hit. For some people, that emotional hit is being vulnerable. And for some people, that's just who they are. So that's why vulnerability is like relative.
Also, who we are is such a product of our upbringing and the stories in our own household about vulnerability and about emotion. Who's allowed to be emotional? Who's allowed to be angry in the house you grew up in?
Oh my God, guys, stop. I'm gonna start crying. I was like, I'm like hot. You're taking me back to my childhood. I was like, I wasn't allowed to be angry. And then I got very angry.
Or if we had big emotional, or if we had big emotional stuff, and then we were told to like,
turn down, to like put it back in the
calm
box.
down. That you have to calm down.
That's right. Put it back in the box. Yeah.
I mean, emotions are obviously for everybody. Okay, who needs therapy? I mean,
it says Roxanne Francis, the psychotherapist.
It's what we're doing here. Wait, I was gonna go. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm gonna circle back. Honestly, I'm like, stop it. Don't.
No, but I love, Samara, what you're saying, because I think it does, like when we talk about leadership, right? And we talk about what it means to be a good leader, an authentic leader. I think that has been like what that looks like has been defined mostly by men, right? Yeah. And so I think what you're saying is that like, if somebody shows emotion, does that make them like less impactful, less powerful, less of a leader? And I think, you know, we're having this conversation to say that it doesn't, right? It doesn't make you, it's like, it's we are bringing our power and the way we display power and the way we connect with people and our whole self to our leadership role. And that looks different than the way it has been defined in the past. And we need to redefine it. It needs to.
For men too. I mean, I know a number of people
they also need
in the executive presence space who go in and help men come across more loving.
Yes.
I mean, you know,
take down some of their walls.
Well, I was even thinking, you know, like Monique, I know you mentioned, you know, strategy wise, I'm always thinking in that way too. I'm always like, okay, where's the masculine? Where's the feminine here? And strategically, I think now when we're showing up, right, and we're really understanding on a different level what storytelling is and what type of impact we can make with it and how it humanizes the brand, right? All of these things. And I think why, you know, especially these days, you know, being vulnerable, putting ourselves out there, right? One takes radical self-love. I really, truly believe that. If you're going to show up and whether you're talking about something that you've been through or like, hey, this is a big idea I have, you know, this is where I'm going, and you're claiming that and you're, you know, you're putting it out there, that takes radical self-love, because to be able to show up and open yourself to all of the critique and other people's opinions and all, you know, these things, you have to love yourself on such a deep level and have next level confidence, or else when those comments start coming in, those DMs start coming in, right? That's when things can get really shaky.
I love that. And when I was thinking, while you were talking, I was thinking about the times when I do not have the confidence for something, or I do not feel like I have self-love for it. What I do have is supportive people. Not to say everyone has it, but I'm trying to, like, when I was thinking about, well, what is it I have? Sometimes I do have a lot of confidence in that thing. Sometimes I have, like, it's going to be okay. I do a lot of talking to myself, and I do want to talk to you guys about some of the techniques that you use, because anybody who's listening, like, I don't want to pretend like this is an easy thing to do. I do a lot of talking to myself. And one thing, a friend had told me when I had Amare, and he's 2 now, but when I first had him, I basically had to shut down online because I couldn't balance it all. I was like, everyone before this told me, you can have a baby and run your business and have this big $100,000 retreat. If anyone can do it, Monique, you can. You can bring your 3-month-old on a plane and, like, move your. First of all, yes, it didn't break me. It was fantastic. And it almost broke me. Right. And what I had at that time was the right people around me who were like, Monique, if you disappear offline for a little bit, you've built a strong enough brand that you will come back. Don't you worry. People know who you are. Like I had enough people in my ears and in my corner to hold me up when I couldn't. I could not have done that. So it's not always going to be confident, and it's not always going to be self-love for me, but I really, and everybody, again, this comes back to, like you were saying, around that self-awareness piece. Like, I have to tap into my people, the closest people. And I know, Yetunde, you were talking about your 5 close people, right? When you do something, you check in with the peeps them, because those people will not steer you wrong. And those people, have your back. So for me, I'm tapping into my people, but I would love to hear you guys, anything you guys want to share. I'm in my body.
I'm reminded of the definition of vulnerable that I used in my book, because, it is really, it's so wily. It's like authenticity. You're like, sure, but, like, I just know it when I feel it. And there's a lot of, sort of like definition-y stuff on the internet around vulnerability that uses this metaphor of the hole in your armor. And it feels like partly what we're talking about. Of course, we can initially think of armor as, like, whatever, knights and masculinity and hardness. But if we just think of armor as actually our protective stuff, including our friends, our allies, our self-love, then what we're really talking about is the holes in the armor that we're willing to show. And I think this matters. Because I always think about this idea that, like, in all the bad guy movies where, like Liam Neeson is, like, going after someone or whatever, if you steal their daughter, then they'll do what you want. Why is that? Well, the daughter's the vulnerability, right? The daughter's the hole in the armor. The thing about vulnerability is, once we show people what we care about, they know where they can hurt us.
Oh.
And we get to decide that's not what they're going to do. But that decision process is real. And it means, I think, that what we're really getting at, what the processing I was doing early on when you all were talking so brilliantly, and my brain was like, is, why are we being vulnerable, right? I mean, Monique said, use social media knowing what you're doing. When we say what we're doing with being vulnerable, I think we all probably get some sort of like, I don't mean to be manipulative. So I'm just putting that word manipulative over in a little box for a second, and let's actually maybe unpack, what are we doing when we're being vulnerable? Because I talk about storytelling and that we're usually doing one of 3 things, and I think it might be the same. I'm going to run this by you for your feedback. 1, when we're telling a story, it's often as a gift for the other person. I'm telling this as it's been discussed here, right? I'm sharing about menopause because, like, if you need to not feel alone, you're not alone. 2, guidance, literally, like, here's what I did. Is this useful for you? And 3, a Genesis story, which is like, your origin story, or the origin of an idea, or the origin, which is actually often like, now you see me more. So I see you, I'm helping you with some guidance, or you see me. I think vulnerability, there's like, it's similar, right? Like when we decide to sort of show a hole in our armor, it can seem like it's always just like, oh, now there's a hole in my armor and you know what I care about. But also we're doing it in order to say like, I see you, or I don't know, like this is.
Yeah,
tell me
no,
what your
I love,
thoughts are.
no,
I think-
one of those are true for me.
Yeah,
Kanan.
I think so too. And I think that when we try to cover up the holes in our armor, it's also is how we become so lonely, right? Like we need connection, and we need real connection. And the only way we can really connect with someone is to show our whole selves. And that includes the holes in our armor. And that has been my experience in all my years of working, where it wasn't like vulnerability was never on the checklist of like, we want somebody who is vulnerable. Like that was never, yeah, it was like detail.
It was always thick skin. That's like thick. It's on all what's it called? The job description.
Yes.
It must be thick skin. Work in a
That's right.
fast-paced environment.
Exactly. It's never vulnerable, but like, I mean, I don't know if I'm just born with the vulnerability gene or what. And of course I've like nurtured it over time, but I think what I experienced was when I was vulnerable, it did allow for that greater connection. And that taught me this is a good thing. Like I feel less alone. They feel less alone, and that's what we all want. We all want to feel like we're not alone. We all want to feel like you said, Samara, seen. We want to feel seen, and we want to help others feel seen. And that's what we do when we show the holes in our armor.
I think vulnerability has. Oh, sorry.
Just naming it.
Okay,
I'm just going to shout out what's in the chat, because the word that we aren't quite using but is totally underneath everything we're saying is trust, right? If we want to build trust, and not fake trust, like you can trust me, like the salesy thing that we heard growing up.
I do want to ask this question because Sarah had asked us a bit ago around, do you know, I don't know this term, so maybe you guys do. Brene Brown calls floodlighting. Do you think this is a thing on social media? Does anyone know what floodlighting is? I have no idea what this is. Sarah, if you have the definition, please drop it for us, and we'd be happy to discuss it.
I'm assuming it's the sort of like big, bold, like slamming people with your like over vulnerable shares, like
okay,
vulnerability porn. Dare I say?
Those are the stuff that stuff like that the algorithm loves that shit, right? So there are people who like thrive and build platforms around just like all that, like look at the car wreck, do not look away from the car wreck, look at the car wreck.
But it's like you said, Monique, even if it draws the attention, does it like serve your, like if you are leading in some way and if you're trying to guide people in some way, does it serve you there? It may serve you in terms of likes or getting like, fed the algorithm loves it, but it may not really in our world really serve what your ultimate goal is.
I think the subconscious goal and desire of vulnerability as a word as itself is connection. I think underneath all of it, vulnerability is like, I need you to see me. I want you to see me. Like vulnerability's goal, no matter what you're sharing about, is can you connect to another human being? Can you spilling your heart help somebody see you, see that you matter? So even for people who they may not necessarily want to be vulnerable, but the situation calls for it, it's vulnerability on its own, trying to connect to another human being, see what I'm going through. Please feel me so that you can know that I'm here and that I matter. So when I think, obviously with my NLP, I always just think the subconscious part of things, like what is the positive intent? Even the negative things have a positive intent. What is the positive intent of vulnerability? It's connection. Can you connect with me? Can I connect with you? Can you see me? Even if you don't agree with me, can you feel my emotions so that I can move forward in whatever the situation is? So when I think on a subconscious level, what happens when people are not able to be vulnerable is there's a desire for connection, but they don't know how. And so I always tell my clients, what does vulnerability look like for you? Like, some people are like, they're open book. Some people need to process. Some people need to be in the midpoint to share, and then they will come back and carry you along. But my whole thing is, if you're on here and you're trying to figure out, okay, I want to be more vulnerable, I want to share more, you please get to do it your way. Like we don't, like we can all share advice and give you all the things, but please figure out what vulnerability looks like for you. As long as you understand that on the subconscious level, your vulnerability on its own, minus whatever the situation is actually just looking for connection. So what are the things you can share so that you can feel seen by the people you serve, by your audience, by the people that you want to support? What are the emotional things that you can share so that you can know, oh my God, she's just like me? Have them see you, because that vulnerability helps them connect to you. And Monique, it's funny because literally this morning, I posted something. Because of this, I just remembered, I was like, oh my God, I remember making almost $12,000 from sharing one vulnerable story from my honeymoon, because I was like freaking bawling at the honeymoon, some bad, terrible massage I got, and I was bawling, and it ended up being this whole epiphany. So I somehow synthesized the information, I shared it. My friend was like, oh my God, you should put this in a magazine. I'm like, girl, I'm just telling you, why I gotta be in the magazine? It ends up in this magazine, somebody reads it. Literally, she said, I've been following you online for years. That story is why I signed up to be your client. She sends me another client, and like months later, I'm like 12 grand in. I'm like, oh my God. Like that was the first, this was probably like 10 years ago. That was the first time I was like, well, no, 9 years, we've been married. First time I was like, okay, this vulnerability thing has a thing.
Like I should share my whole self. I should share all of the bit. Actually, you brought me to a good point, Yatunde. I love that, because I would love for you guys to actually share from a story around how you should coming with your whole self, how that translated into something like an opportunity. It could be monetary or otherwise, right? But I think it would be helpful for people to see, like, we all share in different ways. And it isn't always like something you strategically thought of doing, but it ended up turning into some really great opportunity, or some new opening, or some new business, or something like that. Because I love, Samara, you were talking about trust. We've talked about trust, connection. These two things are vital in being a business owner right now, always, but particularly now, if you're wanting to like stand out amongst all the freaking noise. So who would love to share? I got tons of stories, but I would love Christina, please.
Yes. So I made a post, and I was terrified to share this shit, like just terrified, right? And I was just sure that like if I came out and said, okay, yes, I run a seven-figure business, and I also struggle with depression and anxiety, and I had been in it for like the last year. I mean, like waking up every single day feeling totally hopeless, right? And that was something that for a year I chose to keep sacred, right? I had never experienced depression before, so it was something I struggled with heavily. And I just knew that if my clients found this out, if other potential clients found this out, then they wouldn't want to work with me, right? Because we're supposed to be happy, we're supposed to be cheery, we're supposed to be enthused, excited, all of those things, right? We're supposed to be on fire, and so but I had this moment where I was coaching one of my clients in my mastermind, and she was also really struggling with depression, had a lot of personal things going on in her life, and she wasn't showing up. And so of course what happens, right? Her sales are going down, her business is very, very like social media forward with all of her inquiries. And so she's struggling, and I'm like, girl, okay, we got to find a way. We got to find a way. We got bills to pay. We've got places to go. And I realized, God, I'm sitting here, coaching her through this, coming up with content for her, but I have this big secret at that point it was. And so I wrote this post. I remember one morning I got up at 5:30 a.m., was like sitting on the couch, it's just like pouring out of me. And then right before I went to hit post, I was like, oh no, I do this, people are going to pull contracts. Oh no, who wants to work with someone like this? But I literally, I cannot be a hypocrite. I just can't. So I was like, you know what? Fuck it. Post. And I put my phone down and I made myself walk away. You'll get my daughter ready for school. I was like,
I will look at this in 6 hours.
Yeah, I came back to it and it had blown up, it had blown up, and it was just a carousel post of me typing in my notes, literally screenshot, nothing fancy. And within, I think, a few hours, I had someone reach out to me and she said, girl, I know this is last minute. I know you're probably booked, but I want you to come and speak at this event. I want people, she said, we need more people like you that show different sides of business, right? That you can have things going on in your life and still be really successful. And it was like a few weeks away, y'all. It was in a castle. Okay. And when I say a castle, I mean this event, it was insane. And so I was like, yes, I'll do it. So literally booked that in a few hours, went to that event and made, I don't know, somewhere like over 50K in that single day from that speaking event, which of course turned into reoccurring revenue because our clients are happy and they stay with us. But every single time, and I say this every single time, I have that feeling like, oh God, oh God, oh God, if people know this, they will not work with me. And I share it every single time I make money, period.
Oh yeah. Okay, I'm gonna have to write that down because I have some posts that are literally sitting in drafts for like 6 months.
Oh yeah, girl.
I'm like, I'm not. I can't do it.
Button.
I can't. But I love that. I love that. Who else wants to share a story, guys? I mean,
I'm gonna share just a much more like a lower stakes one, just to give variety, I feel like, but also because I like see you and I bow down to you, and I want to offer something that maybe is like an easier lift for anybody who's listening, because it's something that I've been playing with and it feels light rather than heavy, right? Which is I have a number of corporate meetings. It's usually me coming in as the outsider and us discussing in what shape exactly I'm going to come in and speak to their corporation around communications and public speaking. And often it's for women or for younger people or for any group that doesn't sound like old, rich, white men. And thus, if they've read my book or know anything about me, they know I'm like a bit of a rebel. Like clearly a palatable enough one that they're interested in having me in their staid corporate environment, right? But like, I'm gonna have some personality. So I just knew going into this sort of like corporate era of my life, once the book was out, and I had a lot, frankly, of like social privilege, to just spend it by being as me as possible and being a real human and asking real questions and asking for clarification when something doesn't make sense and naming like jargon when I hear it and asking, why are your people really there and not at your competitor? Like what's like a vibe under the vibe? And I've had so many corporate people, which by the way are people, to be clear, but like, you know, they step into their like corporate persona. Write me afterwards or say at the end of the thing, this was my favorite meeting of the whole week or the whole month or of the whole whatever. And it's like have I lost a job that way? Yes. Have I gained more? Yes. And trust, right? And relationship building. Yes.
And one I'm sure feels 100% better than the other anyways. Like,
and I don't even know if that job I lost was because I was like being myself or just because they didn't have the money or, you know, whatever.
Well, like, right. So let's not just say that they didn't like Samara, because I do not have
it. Felt a little like perhaps I was a hair. My mom said once, oh my gosh, vulnerable share. My mom said once, I was like maybe out of being a teenager, but like somewhere in my maybe early 20s. And she said, Samara, and we're very different, my mom and me socially. She's more introverted. And she was like, Samara, I've watched you talk to people and you have this incredible ability to like know where the line is, where like you can say something just a little shocking, but like not so shocking that they turn. How do you know where that line is? And as soon as she said it, I realized it's true. And now I'm like self-conscious about the line and am I going to get it wrong? But until then, I don't. Anyway,
they hire you.
With that line of being real has massive benefits and also obviously some drawbacks. And that is why all of us have and anyone who's not on this panel has moments of terror, because obviously there is risk. The question is, how do we manage the risk? How much do we, you know, Monique and I had this amazing conversation a few weeks ago, and I shared something that had been a big aha this last year, which is that for many of us, what the interesting inflection point for aspects of our career that are like us stepping out, but also for little moments of vulnerability, is when is our care bigger than our carefulness?
Oh, every time you say it.
I just am blown away every time I say it, because I'm like, it's so fucking real.
Yeah. And I think what, you know, speaking to what Christina was saying earlier, just around like when you feel like, I don't know for everyone how but that sense of duty, there is, for me, that is a big driver for me, when there's a sense of there's something in me, like I cannot not share it. right? And I know it's going to
Yeah.
be difficult and it might be challenging for me. Other people may see it as not a big thing, but it is my vulnerable place. I feel compelled to do it. Like I can't not do it, right? That's when like I'm kind of like, even if it goes left in terms of the response, I'm going to be okay with it because I had to do it. I couldn't in my body not do it, right? And speaking of like being on a panel, when I was on this panel around, it was for moms, and I had become a new mom, and I was like, oh, I get to be on mom panels now, and a mompreneur business like panel. I'm like, okay, awesome. And I'm
Whole new world.
here. I love it, right? I'm like, oh, a new facet to my career. And there's these women in the audience, and the question is all about like, how do you balance it all? And I'm like, what the there is no such thing. I said, I cannot speak to people with multiple children. I cannot speak to anyone in their life. I said, every mom journey, I'm going to just assert is completely different. But I am telling you right now, it fucked me up. Like, I'm not.
Yeah.
The beginning of that totally had me question every part of who I am. And it's come back around, and I'm, slowly. And I'm like, oh, she's back. I got it. But that time I was like, I don't know what to tell you. And I remember in my head, it's like, what's interesting is I can say things and I'm thinking at the exact same time, like, Monique, stop telling them the truth, stop telling them the truth, stop telling them the truth. I would never work with you if they think that you're all fucked up. But it was like, this is going, and we put our NLP master in here. So I know she's like listening to me. My voice is going in my head, like, stop talking, shut your mouth. Tell them it's great, it's positive, you're strong, and all that never happened. I said, Monique, that is not what people need to hear. No. That's not what you needed to hear when people told you the opposite. And it was so great to just have some people afterwards like come up to me and be like, thank you for telling the truth. Yeah. Thank you for telling the truth, because I'm so sick of watching the highlight reel of Instagram and all these moms, whatever they're showing. And I can't say that is their life or isn't, but that is what I was comparing it to. I'm like, you're going on all of these amazing vacations with your multiple kids, and you've got these very interesting like ways of them sleeping in these really cool sleeping bags on the plane and all. We were a fucking Honda Express. We were getting on that plane. Like, we had strangers helping us. I was like, I don't know how to shut the stroller,
Why is it always shutting the stroller? Somebody
TSA with all the people behind you.
TSA with a stroller. TSA with a stroller. That's what we should all make a post about to let people know.
Real.
I have
a story. Oh, sorry. After you, Christina. Please.
Okay, I was just gonna say I have a few points I've been like dying to make. One of them is this whole highlight reel perfectionism. It's fucking boring and it's fucking out. We just have to, I feel like we all know that, right? Anyone who is really making an impact these days really understands that well. Perfectionism is out, everyone's bored by it. And not in a way of like show up and share it to be, on purpose so that you're not perfect, but it's just that we're tired of it. We're so exhausted by it, and we're not moved by it. You know what I mean? And that's one reason why I know that storytelling works so well. And what I also wanted to say is there's this other element that I feel like we haven't really spoke about here when sharing vulnerable things, and it's a bit of like what I refer to as shame slaying. Right? There's something that happens, like we talked about, like showing holes in our armor, right? But to me, when anyone takes this thing that feels really like we're really protective of it, we're like, no, this is our hole. To me, I see it as we put it out in front, and instead of giving other people the power to take this thing and use it against it, we claim that power, and we say, no, right here, boo. This is what's going on. This is what I'm going through. And you get to share your side of the story, but also, from there, once you put it out, there's this like release that happens for you, but suddenly we're not afraid of anyone else bringing it up because we claimed our power and we put it out there for everyone to see. And that piece, I think, is what's really interesting to me about how we show up, right? And whether that's in our day-to-day conversations or whether that's online, right? And that also, I think, ties into leadership. Like every single woman here on this panel, and I would bet anything on every single woman that's watching right now, we are all leaders in some way. for a lot of us, we're leaders in every aspect of our life, right? And we get to really change the narrative here, and right, whether we see ourselves as rebels, or we see ourselves as like, you know, really heart-led women, heart-led leaders. And we get to give people a piece of what it's like when they come into our world. Like when we work together, I am a complete open book. It's not just the strategy that I'm talking about, right? It's also about how all of these personal things affect our business and how we show up and how we move through them. And I think sharing that can be really, really powerful. And it's what makes people, right? It activates people, and it activates them to either work with you or to share something themselves. But there's a ripple effect of side effects that happen when we show up in that way, in that type of power specifically.
So, you know, I think I have a metaphor that can land what Christina just shared. And so I preface this with, so my husband, much older than me, I always forget sometimes, but he's like a thought leader in philanthropy. And I remember when I decided I wanted to go full-time coaching, because I was doing PR, I was doing international PR. I was the Black girl in classical music, just all the things, right? And so when I decided, okay, you know what, I know what I'm good at, I know what I'm called for. I want to do this coaching bit like full on. So he was trying to like help me with business planning and like how to think about it. And I was getting stuck. And here's the funny thing. We spent almost 3 hours on this meeting. My husband shares one metaphor and I'm like, oh, he's like, you mean to tell me I spent 3 hours? I could have just said this. I was like, okay, well, you know, you have to say the whole thing. But here's the metaphor he used that made sense until today makes sense. He said, think about like your business and being vulnerable as either a one-night stand or having a relationship. He said, you can be a great one-night stand. He's like, right now you operate on great one-night stand. Like I wasn't trying to get to know people too much. Like I would do the job for you, freaking excellent PR, excellent branding, purpose for all the things, and just be out. He's like, your clients wake up in the morning, they're trying to be like, go for coffee and drinks and breakfast. And you're like, deuces. And they're like, you're a good lay, but bye. You're like out. I was like, okay, what are you saying? And he said, think about it as intrinsic value. What kind of relationship do you want to have with this woman that you're going to start coaching? They're going to share their lives with you. You don't get to one night stand that situation. They're going to be vulnerable. They're going to share and be open. I literally remember sitting and meditating and like prepping my mind because I'm an empath and I literally feel everybody's energy in this room. So imagine having a one-on-one coaching, doing NLP and like limiting belief work. I'm like feeling all the things. So before the conversation starts, I'm bawling and they're bawling. I'm like, all right, how's this going to work out? And so what that helped me do is, all right, to be vulnerable means I can't do one night stands anymore. I need to have a relationship with those I love, AKA those I'm called to serve. And what that looked like was be open. Whatever story that comes up that I need to share, I share. Family, friends, whatever they need to get to their clarity, I share that. And so I found that the moment I made that switch on the vulnerability bit in my mind, whenever I've been coaching now for a while. And so now when I have conversations with my clients, I can count how many clients are not my friends right now. Almost all of my clients become friends because it's so intimate. We're crying on the call. Yesterday, I had a session with one of my clients who works like at the top, like Fortune 50, and we're bawling on the phone on Zoom together because I'm like, that was me deciding. I remember deciding, okay, I have to be vulnerable. I don't get to be like, all right, here's the thing, and bye. It's like, open your heart, see me, I see you. We feel each other. We honor the moments. End of story. And so if you think about vulnerability as deciding to have an intrinsic long-term relationship with your audience and those you love, instead of a one-night stand, they want to have breakfast in the morning. They want to take you out to lunch. They want to date you. They want to be with you. Please stop being a one-night stand-ish. Like we're grown now. We don't do one-night stands anymore. We do intrinsic, valuable relationships. And so think about being vulnerable as building a relationship with those you serve by sharing yourself, and not in a one-night stand. Oh, boom, I'm out. It's like, I want to get to know you. I want you to get to know me. And I hope it works out. And if it doesn't, you were a cool person anyway.
I love that. Samara.
Yeah, I love that. Oh, go ahead.
No,
Samara.
it's so, well, no, I just have a question, which is how do you think about boundaries? Yeah.
Okay, so when it comes to boundaries, is deciding if the thing I'm going to share, is it detrimental to me or the person I'm serving? Right? So usually boundaries, depending on what is being asked or what you're trying to open yourself to, what happens is your ego shows up. And it's either okay, this, whatever it is, I'm going to use it to feed my ego. Or if I share this thing, if I don't set this boundary, it's going to be detrimental to me, my well-being, or the other person's well-being. If you put those two things in consideration, then you can set boundaries, because at the end of the day, it's either someone is trying to come into your boundary, so you have to set it, or if you're trying to go into theirs. But either way, it is, whatever it is it going to be detrimental to them, or is it going to be detrimental to me, or is it going to be helpful to both of us? But sometimes you have to set those boundaries for your well-being and for their well-being. And that's why loving people matters. Because when you love people, the way you treat them or the way you decide to set boundaries is completely different than how you would treat any small Joe you want. So when you love those you're called to serve, it's easy to set the boundaries and they will respect it because there's love there. And I think that's the thing that's missing with all of this stuff that we do, is we forget the love parts. For what we do in this world, no matter who you are, you're watching this, you're listening to this, it is important that you love the people that you serve. When you do love them, they feel that love, and it's just like being seen. They will give you what you need. You give them what they need. It's a symbiotic, loving relationship.
I think as like coaches, which we all are here and either have been for a long time or have morphed into many different forms of it. Like I always say, like coaching is a calling. It's not just something you do. There are a lot of coaches out there and people have a lot of things to say about different types of coaches. But I always say, like, at the heart of me, I am coach. It doesn't matter what I am building for you. And I also think when you work with new clients, or even when you are sharing your stuff with your audience, I always set expectations. Like I tell people who you getting. This is who I am. I tell them on a discovery call, this is who you're getting. When we start a relationship, we are actually in one. This is a very intimate relationship that we're about to get into. So you have to like me and I have to like you, or this is not going to work. Right. And I think everyone needs to kind of put that hat on. And sometimes you're so afraid of losing the business that you wouldn't say something like that. But if you do, or I feel like if you are in a service-based business where you work with people one-on-one, or even in intimate groups, it's important for you to have that self-awareness and define when you set, like, I love how you're saying, like, when you set those types of boundaries, you're being very loving to the other person because they now know what to expect. Versus you don't set those boundaries, they cross them and don't know it. And now you're acting like, why are you even here? You know what I mean? And then that stays with them forever. No one forgets after they've hired a coach and it didn't feel great, that relationship. And they may never say something directly to you, which is even worse. I'm coming from the branding perspective. They don't even tell you. They out here not talking about you and talking about you. You don't want that. So I love that. Like, it's loving to set the boundary, letting people know who you are, letting people know why you're here. And I'm like, just in terms of like practicality, I will tell people like new to my feed, like I message as much as I can, any new follower. Hey, what had you come here? Hey, was there something I posted? I love to post more of that. Like know who's there. Cause sometimes you get the trolls, but know who you're talking to and know what content really resonated with them. So you can do more of that and be like, oh, this. And a lot of the times it isn't even about your business. It's about something completely unrelated. And this is something I'm discovering and the team's discovering with the marketing. We're asking people, like, what resonated? What had you come here? What brought you in? Who brought you in? Because back to what you guys were saying about having real connections and relationships with people, if someone says, I saw you on Kana's, live, I saw you over here, I saw you over there, I'm like, oh, great, I can go back to those people and be like, oh my God, thank you so much. Thank you. Because also it's like that. If they came through you, I kind of already know who that person is because y'all don't play. So y'all ain't coming over here to play because they don't play. My 2 cents on that. Anyone else? Guys, this is so awesome. I'm a big like believer that we don't need to extend the conversation any further than it needs to when the gems have been dropped. I'll be quite frank. I think you guys have left everybody with some real practical things to do, some introspection to do. the trust, connection, building real relationships, that real piece around like knowing why you're here, loving who you serve. Like, guys, there's just so many pieces here that you can go and take and now put that into your marketing, put that into your offers, put that into your discovery calls. And I really do believe that everyone is transformed by this conversation. I do truly believe you will have your next interaction will be very different from any interaction you had prior. And if it's not, then you need therapy. No, I'm joking.
Monique, one thing I wanted to add, just because
Yes,
I know
please.
everybody.
Final words from the guests.
Yeah. I know not everybody on the call is, in like the same industry that we're in. Some of them are in the corporate world. I think that like for you, this, it still has that same depth of impact in being vulnerable because that is how we truly connect to people. So one of your questions that you had sent to us was like around this whole thing of AI and like, how do we stand out and how is it more important to be vulnerable? Because it's true, like we have been reduced to being bullet points on a LinkedIn profile or a resume. And we are so much more than that. We have so much depth, right? And we have ways that we can connect with other people. And when we share more of ourselves, that allows people to see us in a much deeper way than this like bullet points, like the bullet points, right? And that is what gets you through doors. That is what gets people to remember you. That is what gets people to bring you back for a second interview or to refer you to somebody else. So I think just regardless of what you do for work or in your life, this finding your relationship with vulnerability, finding your comfort level with vulnerability can really open a lot of doors, can open opportunities for you. And so like whatever your current relationship is, it's worth considering, where could I open up a little bit more? Where could I share? What could the possibilities be for me if I were to do that? And like examining that, right? Like examining why you're maybe holding back and what could be on the other side of opening up a bit more. And I feel like even all of us on this panel could probably think about that, right? Where are we holding back a little bit,
I don't tell everybody all the sauce.
I know, I'm thinking about you.
I was like, there's stuff I won't be saying. I'm saying. And that point to just like the corporate point, the point you're making about if you are in the corporate space, and I've been in the corporate space, I think all of us have been in the corporate space at some in time, in some shape or form. That that's just another game of social, right? Like when they talk about like in-office politics, they're not like playing around. Like when they say people get promoted over you, even though they're less qualified and things like, it's about the connection they have with that person. And I always used to look at it as the person who is with you in your office, they are asking themselves, how much time do I want to spend with this person? Like they're spending 8 hours with you a day. They ain't going to promote you if they don't like you. Right? They rather go promote so-and-so who's like their bestie, who they, you know what I mean? So it's something that like, you cannot underestimate the being open, building connections, and being liked in the office, in a corporate environment, right? Yeah, Samara.
And I think that the challenge for each of us, and taking Christina's point that we're all leaders in some capacity, I like to say leadership with a lowercase L, right? It's not an official title necessarily, but the ways in which we lead our family, our friends, our sphere of influence at any given moment. I want to name this point that someone in the chat made around that floodlighting idea of like too much vulnerability. And there's this really important part of it that comes, I guess, from Brene Brown, where she says that Brene Brown says it's when you share with someone who hasn't earned it yet. And I think what we've been talking about here, because of social media, but even thinking of it in the corporate space, is that we don't always have the luxury of them earning it first, and that it is a gamble and it's a leadership move to be the one who shows your heart first. And that the gamble is, this is going to add more love into the world, and this is going to like open up rather than close down. And sometimes it won't. And sometimes the gamble will have failed and it'll suck, and you can, turn to your friends and you can turn to your self-love And then you start again the next day. There's this amazing, like, I don't know if meme is the right image, but it's a single image with a top and a bottom, like two panels, little stick figures. And the first one is the person says, I'll show you mine if you show me yours. And then the second one is them both going like this at the same time. And their little hearts are right there. And the reality is, I'll show you mine if you show me yours. And the other person says, okay. And then we sometimes don't get the okay first. Certainly if we're the one creating content on social media, we don't get the okay first. And we just go, I'm going to show you my heart.
I love that. There's a question that came in on the Q&A that any one of you guys can answer, but it says, how does vulnerability work for people who say they are female in a male-dominated team and industry that does lead into stereotypical gender norms? I find that men are more vulnerable with me and open to connection broadly, but when it comes to actual hard business decisions or things that are contentious, they are inclined to think that I will do something self-sacrificing professionally, citing, but don't you care about feelings, connection, rather than the sort of hard decisions they would make for themselves? So I'm taking, if I paraphrase this, is you're in a male-dominated industry and the men want you to basically sacrifice. Basically, you make the type of sacrifices men wouldn't make when it comes to like making those like decisions inside of a work environment. That's what it sounds like to me. If I'm wrong, I need you to post that in the chat. Is that an actual question? Like a question you guys like? What do you? I mean, if I was just to be like, I used to work in a male-dominated type, like where the ones who had the bigger paying jobs were usually mostly the guys. And it's tough to say because I always, whether I'm in a corporate space or whether I'm coaching, I'm still bringing me. I know I'm self-aware enough to know what builds connection. So I don't know. And
my question back to the person who asked the question is, are they right? I don't mean this with any shame at all. Because some of us who are more love oriented will sacrifice the bottom line for people. And
many women will.
And if they're wrong, after you've sort of done a little inquiry on this, then you can more powerfully say, you're wrong and you're making assumptions based on the fact that I show up in this certain way and it feels a little gendery, frankly. And I think we can all do better than that. And just name biases where you see them.
Ooh.
Which sucks.
Oh my God, Samara.
It's easier if HR is there. But otherwise, like the thing about biases is that if we assume as humans we all have them because our brains do that us versus them thing, then we can work on breathing through saying that something seems like it's a bias without being accusatory and showing up with strength and warmth, which I talk about in my book and is a really, really helpful way to say really, really terrifying things. But to say this might be a link to say to your favorite male ally inside of your thing, I feel like there's a bias that keeps showing up here. And even though I'm really loving and you guys love that I'm really loving and that I'm really emotional, I can also do the hard work. And if you don't totally believe that's true, I think that is actually gender bias here. Unless they're right. Which is also interesting.
He actually responded, said they aren't right.
They are not right. It's
great.
I think what you just said there, I need you because I don't know the name of the attendee because it's anonymous, but I think the way you had addressed it right there was so perfect, right? I don't feel like that would be confronting at all to somebody who was hearing it. And I really want to.
You can even say, I totally understand. I totally understand. This is like a long-standing cultural bias. There's a reason that women are the ones who are asked to go get coffee. It's not just because you see us as an assistant, even when we're equal. It's also because you think of us as a caretaker, right? This is a cultural story. You were programmed the way we were all programmed, but I'm trying to deprogram us right now.
Let them know. I love that. Well, ladies, I will allow you to get back to the rest of your transformational change in the world kind of day. And I want to thank everybody for coming, sharing. Go and catch that replay. Go and catch these nuggets because, I am left with so many quotables that I am really it has changed me. It has me do some serious introspection as well and see where I am holding back and could be showing up even more because I have a circle like you guys around me to hold me accountable. So thank you guys for being here. Thank you guys all for showing up, and stay tuned. The replay will be in your box shortly. Okay.
Monique,
And if
thank you for
people
having
want to
us.
follow us, should we, you're gonna have stuffy stuff,
If
right?
you're not already following, yeah, guys, can you go and put your handle in the chat? I've sent out the handle, but y'all don't read no emails. I sent out
Monique,
What
thank you
is-
so much for having us. I appreciate it. It's been really good. And Kana, to feel your vibe and hear what you have to say. Christina, you as well. And Tamara, thank you so much. I've learned
Yes.
from you. It was nice tapping to your vibe today. I appreciate you, and I look forward to getting to know you, ladies.
Yeah, me
Same.
too.
It's-
Absolutely. This was so
Absolutely.
fun.
It's a
Thank you,
pleasure to be
Monique,
on
for bringing
such a
us
smart
together.
panel.
Love
Yes,
you guys.
thank you, Monique.
Thank you. Get some rest,
Bye.
Christina.
Bye.